The first thing Sayla noticed about the human was how small he was. She stood in the welcoming hall of the Valorian Grand Embassy, surrounded by her people, tall, elegant beings with silver blue skin and eyes like polished gems. They had gathered to receive the first long-term diplomatic envoy from Earth, and everyone expected something impressive. Humans were strange creatures from a harsh world, after all. Surely their representative would reflect that wildness. Instead, the man who stepped off the shuttle looked like he might blow away in a strong wind. Daniel Cooper was average height by human standards, which meant he barely reached Sila's shoulder. He had brown hair that was slightly messy from travel, warm eyes the color of earth after rain, and a gentle smile that seemed almost apologetic. He carried his own bags instead of letting the servants take them, and his first words to the assembled council were a thank you for having him. Sayla's father, a senior member of the Valorian High Council, leaned toward her and whispered, "This is what Earth sends us? A soft little creature who thanks people for doing their jobs." She did not answer. She was too busy watching the human bow to a cleaning servant who had accidentally bumped into him. The servant looked terrified at having touched the foreign dignitary. Daniel simply smiled and asked if the servant was all right. Strange, Sayla thought. Very strange. As the daughter of a council member, Sayla was assigned to be Daniel's cultural liaison. It was considered a minor duty, something to keep her busy while more important people handled more important matters. No one expected the human mission to amount to much. Humans were new to galactic politics, small and weak compared to the great powers. They had no massive fleets, no conquered territories, no ancient legacy of dominance. They were, in the words of one council member, interesting but ultimately forgettable. Sayla accepted her assignment without complaint. She was curious about humans, if nothing else. She had read reports about their world, a planet of extreme temperatures, violent weather, and predators that would make most Valorians faint. Earth was classified as a death world, a place so hostile that intelligent life should never have evolved there at all. And yet it had. And yet humans had not only survived but thrived, spreading across their world and then reaching for the stars. How did such soft-looking creatures come from such a hard place? She began to learn the answer in small moments over the following months. Daniel was patient in ways that confused her. When negotiations stalled, he did not raise his voice or make demands. He listened. He asked questions. He remembered the names of everyone he met, from high counselors to the workers who cleaned his quarters. He learned to speak Valorian with a terrible accent but genuine effort, and he never grew frustrated when people laughed at his mistakes. "Why do you not get angry?" Sayla asked him one evening as they walked through the crystal gardens outside the embassy. The twin moons of Valoria cast soft purple light across the flowers. Daniel considered the question. "Anger is easy," he said. "Understanding is harder. I find that most problems come from people not understanding each other. So I try to understand first. And if understanding fails?" Something flickered in his eyes, there and gone so fast she almost missed it. "Then I hope it never comes to that." She wanted to ask what he meant, but he changed the subject, pointing at a flower and asking what it was called. His curiosity seemed endless. He wanted to know about Valorian art, music, poetry, history. He spent his free time in the public markets, talking to ordinary people, learning how they lived. The common folk began to love him for it. Here was a foreign dignitary who did not look down on them, who sat with them in tea houses and asked about their families. Merchants saved their best goods for him. Children ran up to him in the streets, curious about the small alien who always had sweets in his pockets. "You are very popular," Sayla told him, amused, as they walked home from the market one afternoon. A group of children waved goodbye behind them. Daniel shrugged. "I just like people. Even people who are so different from you? He looked at her with those warm, steady eyes. Different does not mean lesser, Sayla. My people learned that lesson the hard way, long ago. We fought each other for thousands of years over differences that seem silly now. Skin color, language, borders drawn on maps. He shook his head. I would rather find what we share than fight over what we do not. She thought about his words that night, and many nights after. Months turned into a year, and then two. Daniel became a fixture in Valorian society, a small curiosity that everyone grew fond of without quite taking seriously. He negotiated trade agreements, cultural exchanges, scientific partnerships. Nothing dramatic, nothing history-changing. Just slow, steady work that built connections between two worlds. Sayla found herself spending more and more time with him. At first she told herself it was duty. Then she admitted it was friendship. Then, one evening in the Crystal Gardens, where they had walked so many times before, she admitted it was something more. I have come to care for you, she said. The words felt strange in her mouth. Valorians did not speak of emotions so directly. Daniel's face softened. I have cared for you since the first day, he said, when you did not laugh at my terrible accent. Your accent is still terrible, I know. He smiled. But you stopped correcting me months ago. I think that means something. They were married under the twin moons in a small ceremony that scandalized Valorian high society. A noble daughter bonding with a human? A creature from a death world, small and soft and utterly unremarkable? Sayla did not care what they whispered. She had found something rare in Daniel Cooper, a gentle soul in a harsh universe. A man who chose kindness when he could have chosen pride. She thought she knew him, completely thought she was wrong. On their wedding night, as they lay together in the moonlight, she traced her fingers across his back and felt them scars, old and faded, running across his skin like a map of forgotten pain. What are these from? She asked. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Another life, he finally said. Before I became what I am now, what were you before? He turned to face her, and his eyes held something she had never seen there, a deep, old sadness that seemed to go down forever. Someone I am trying very hard to forget, he said, and then he held her close. And she let the question fade into the night. She did not know that in 3 years, the answer would come burning out of the darkness like a fallen star. 3 years of marriage taught Sayla many things about her husband. She learned that he woke before dawn, every day to tend his small garden behind their home. He had planted flowers from a dozen different worlds, including several species from Earth that required special care in Valoria's gentle climate. He spoke to the plants as he worked, soft words she could never quite hear from the bedroom window. She learned that he could cook, and that human food was surprisingly delicious once you got past the strange smells. He made her something called pancakes on their anniversaries, golden circles of sweetness that melted on her tongue. She learned that he laughed easily, cried at sad stories, and could spend hours reading poetry in languages he barely understood. But she also learned other things, smaller things, things that did not fit the picture of the gentle gardener she had married. Daniel always sat with his back to the wall. In restaurants, he positioned himself between her and doorways without seeming to realize he was doing it. When they walked through crowds, his eyes moved constantly, tracking movements, noting exits. Once, when a delivery drone malfunctioned and came spinning toward them, Daniel moved faster than she had ever seen anyone move. He had pulled her behind him and raised his arm to block before she even understood what was happening. The drone crashed harmlessly into a wall. Daniel lowered his arm and smiled at her like nothing had happened. Sorry, he said. Old reflexes. She did not ask what kind of life gave someone reflexes like that. She was not sure she wanted to know. And then there were the nights when he could not sleep. She would wake to find the bed empty beside her, and she would find him standing at the window, staring out at the stars. His face in those moments was not the face she knew. It was harder, colder, like stone shaped by terrible winds. He seemed far away, lost in memories she could not reach. Bad dreams? She asked once. Bad memories, he said. They fade with time. But they never seemed to fade completely. Life continued regardless. Daniel's work with the embassy expanded as Earth and Valoria grew closer. Trade flourished. Cultural exchange programs brought Valorian students to Earth and human students to Valoria. It was everything Daniel had worked for, two worlds learning to understand each other, finding common ground. SAE, La was proud of him. Her father, who had once dismissed Daniel as a soft little creature, now spoke of him with grudging respect. He has done more in 5 years than most diplomats do in 50, he admitted. Perhaps there is more to humans than we thought. Perhaps there was. The first shadow fell on a quiet morning in early spring. Sela was in her office at the council building when her assistant rushed in with news. Cathar warships had been spotted near the outer colonies. 3 systems in the neighboring sector had already fallen. She knew of the Cathar Dominion, of course. Everyone did. They were conquerors, a brutal empire that expanded by force and treated other species as slaves or targets. They had been content to stay in their own region of space for generations. But now, it seemed, they were hungry again. The Valorian Council convened an emergency session. Sela attended as her father's aide, watching the councillors argue and panic in equal measure. We must prepare our defenses, one said. What defenses? Another shot back. Our fleet has not seen real combat in 200 years. Our soldiers train for ceremonies, not war. Then we must negotiate. Find terms they will accept. The Cathar do not negotiate. They take what they want and destroy what they cannot use. Around and around the arguments went, fear dressed up in formal language. Sela felt sick watching it. Her people were scholars and artists, diplomats and dreamers. They had built a civilization of beauty and knowledge. They did not know how to face something like the Cathar. She returned home that evening to find Daniel in his garden, carefully watering a row of blue flowers from the Valorian highlands. You have heard the news, she said. It was not a question. I have. He did not look up from his work. The council is frightened. They should be. The Cathar have conquered empires larger than ours. Daniel nodded slowly. He set down his watering can and stood, brushing dirt from his hands. When he turned to face her, his expression was calm, too calm, like the stillness before a storm. May I see the military assessments? He asked. Sela blinked. The military assessments? Daniel, you are a diplomat. What would you want with? I want to understand our situation. His voice was gentle, but there was something underneath it that made her pause. Please, Sela. It may be important. She brought him the reports the next day. He read them in silence, his eyes moving across the data with focused intensity. She watched his face change as he read, growing darker, harder, more like the stranger she sometimes glimpsed in the middle of the night. Our fleet is positioned incorrectly, he said finally. The defense stations lack overlapping fire coverage. The supply lines are exposed. If the Cathar attack, we will lose within days. Sela stared at him. How do you know this? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I served Earth in another way before I became a diplomat. I was trained to understand war, to wage it when necessary. He met her eyes. I left that life behind when I came here. I thought I could escape it forever, but you cannot. I cannot watch your people die because I chose to stay silent. He reached out and took her hands in his. Sela, I need you to arrange a meeting with Commander Drasses. I need to see the defense preparations myself. Commander Yellen Dross was the head of Valorian military forces, a tall, proud officer who had spent his career managing parades and ceremonial guards. When Sayla brought Daniel to his office and explained the request, Drasses laughed out loud. The human gardener wants to inspect my defenses? He shook his head. With respect, Envoy, what could you possibly know about military matters? Daniel did not argue. He simply nodded, thanked the commander for his time, and left. That night, Sayla woke to find him standing at the window again, watching the stars. But this time, his face was not lost in old memories. It was sharp and present, calculating distances and angles, seeing things she could not see. They will come soon, he said quietly. And when they come, your people will not be ready. Then what do we do? He turned to look at her, and for a moment, she saw someone else looking out through his eyes, someone who had walked through fire and come out the other side. We prepare, he said, whether they want us to or not. 1 week later, Cathar warships crossed into Valorian space. Their message was simple. Surrender or die. The time for gardening was over. The council chamber erupted into chaos when the Cathar ultimatum arrived. Sayla stood near the back of the room, watching councilors shout over each other, their elegant composure shattered by fear. Some demanded immediate surrender. Others called for desperate resistance. A few simply sat in stunned silence, unable to process that their world of art and poetry was about to face the brutal reality of war. Daniel stood beside her, quiet and still. He had requested permission to observe the emergency session, and the council had granted it without much thought. What harm could a human diplomat do? He was a curiosity, nothing more. But Sayla noticed how his eyes moved across the room, analyzing each speaker, calculating something she could not understand. The gentle gardener she had married was still there. But there was something else now, something harder, rising to the surface like a blade drawn from its sheath. We cannot fight them, one counselor was saying. Our fleet is ceremonial. Our soldiers have never seen real combat. The Cathar will crush us in hours. Then we surrender, another said. Accept their terms, whatever they are. At least our people will survive. You do not know the Cathar, a third voice cut in. It belonged to Commander Dross, who stood near the front of the chamber with his arms crossed. They do not take surrenders. They take slaves. They will strip our world bare and work our people to death in their mines and factories. Then what do you suggest, Commander? A glorious last stand? A noble death while our civilization burns? Drosses had no answer. None of them did. Into the silence, Daniel spoke. If I may. Every head turned toward him. The human's voice was soft, but it carried across the chamber with strange clarity. Sayla saw confusion on the counselors' faces, and beneath that, a flicker of desperate hope. They were drowning, and any hand reaching toward them seemed worth grasping. The diplomat wishes to speak? The council leader said, On military matters? On survival, Daniel replied. He stepped forward, moving through the crowd of counselors with quiet confidence. I have studied the Cathar battle records. I have analyzed your defensive positions. I believe there is a path forward, not easy, not without cost, but possible. Commander Drosses let out a harsh laugh. And what would a gardener know of warfare? Daniel turned to face him. The movement was slow, deliberate, and when their eyes met, something in Dress's expression changed. The mockery faded, replaced by uncertainty. More than I ever wanted to, Daniel said. He began to speak, and as he did, Sayla felt the world shift beneath her feet. He described the Cathar fleet composition with perfect accuracy. The number of ships, their weapon systems, their typical attack formations. He identified the command ship and explained its weaknesses. weaknesses that Valorian intelligence had missed entirely. He outlined a defensive strategy that used Valoria's smaller fleet as an advantage, turning their weakness in numbers into strength in speed and precision. He spoke like someone who had spent a lifetime studying war, like someone who had lived it. When he finished, the chamber was silent. Even Commander Drosses seemed unable to find words. "How do you know all this?" the council leader finally asked. "Who are you, really?" Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, they held an ancient weariness that made Sayla's heart ache. "Before I was a diplomat," he said, "I was a warden. One of Earth's combat specialists, trained for the worst conflicts humanity could face. I served in 3 planetary wars and more operations than I can count. I retired after my last mission because I could not bear to see any more death." He paused, letting the words settle over the room. "I came to Valoria to build something new, to plant gardens instead of graves. I thought I could leave that part of myself behind forever." He looked toward Scylla, and his eyes softened. "I met someone who made me believe that gentleness could be enough." She felt tears prick at her eyes, but did not look away. "But gentleness cannot stop warships," Daniel continued, turning back to the council. "It cannot protect the children I have seen playing in your streets, or the artists and poets who have made this world beautiful. If your people will die because I stayed silent, then I cannot stay silent." He straightened his shoulders, and suddenly he seemed taller, larger, like something vast condensed into a small human frame. "Give me command of your defense forces," he said. "I cannot promise victory. I cannot promise I will come back. But I can promise that the Cathar will pay for every step they take toward your world." Silence hung in the air. Then Commander Draz stepped forward. His face had transformed from mockery to something like awe. "I have served in the military my entire life," he said slowly. "I have never heard anyone speak of war with such clarity. If the council grants this human command, I will serve under him." The council debated for less than an hour. In the end, desperation outweighed pride. Daniel Cooper, the human gardener, was given temporary command of the Valorian Defense Force. Sayla found him in their garden that evening, kneeling among his flowers one last time. "I wish I could stay here," he said without looking up. "I wish I could pretend this was not happening. I know." She knelt beside him and took his hand. "But you cannot. No." He finally turned to face her, and she saw both versions of him at once. The gentleman who wrote her poetry and the warrior who would walk through fire. "I love you, Sayla. Whatever happens tomorrow, know that." "I know." Her voice trembled. "I have always known." He kissed her then, soft and desperate, and she held on to him as if she could keep him there by force of will alone. But she could not. An hour later, she watched him board a shuttle bound for the orbital defense station. He looked back once, raised his hand in farewell, and then disappeared inside. The shuttle rose into the purple sky and became a point of light among the stars. She did not know that she would never hold him again. The Cathar fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel like a storm breaking over a quiet sea. 50 warships, their hulls dark as burnt iron, spread across the void in perfect attack formation. At their center was the flagship, a massive vessel bristling with weapons that could crack moons. The Cathar commander, a creature named Vorath, who had conquered 12 worlds, looked upon Valoria and saw only another trophy for his collection. On the orbital defense station, Daniel Cooper watched the enemy formation on the tactical display and felt nothing but cold clarity. "All ships, hold position," he said. His voice was calm, steady, carrying none of the fear that filled the Valorian officers around him. "Do not engage until my command." Lieutenant Myra Voss, a young Valorian officer who had been assigned to his command team, leaned toward him. "Commander Cooper, they outnumber us 4-1. Should we not request reinforcements from the colonies? The colonies have no ships to spare. We fight with what we have. Daniel studied the display, his mind racing through calculations that had become instinct long ago. The Kether expect us to form a defensive line around the planet. They will overwhelm us with numbers and firepower. And what will we do instead? Daniel allowed himself a small smile. We will do something they do not expect. On the planet below, Cydela sat in the council chamber with the other leaders, watching the battlefield on a massive display screen. She saw the Cathar fleet, impossibly huge, bearing down on her world. And she saw the tiny Valorian ships, 12 small vessels against 50 giants. Among them was the Quiet Dawn, a destroyer that Daniel had chosen as his command ship. It was small and fast, armed with weapons that seemed like toys compared to the Cathar guns. She watched it move into position and felt her heart squeeze tight in her chest. The Cathar commander opened communications. His image appeared on every screen in the system, a massive reptilian creature with scales like black armor and eyes that held no mercy. "Valorians," Vorth said, "your resistance is meaningless. Surrender now, and some of you may live to serve the Dominion. Fight, and we will reduce your world to ash." A long pause followed. Then Daniel's voice came through the channel, calm and clear. "My name is Daniel Cooper, and I speak for the Valorian Defense Force. We decline your offer." Vorth's eyes narrowed. "A human? The Valorians send a human to answer for them?" "They send me to fight for them," Daniel said. "And I should warn you, Commander humans do not surrender. We do not break. And when we fight for something we love, we burn brighter than stars." The Cathar commander laughed, a harsh sound like grinding metal. "Then burn, little human. And when you are ashes, I will use your world as fuel." The channel closed. The battle began. What followed would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for generations. Daniel did not form a defensive line. Instead, he split his 12 ships into 4 strike groups and sent them weaving through the Cathar formation like needles through cloth. The enemy expected their targets to stay still and die. Instead, the Valorian ships were everywhere and nowhere, hitting weak points and vanishing before the Cathar could respond. On the Quiet Dawn, Daniel commanded with terrifying precision. Orders flowed from him in a constant stream: coordinates, attack vectors, timing sequences. The Valorian officers had never seen anything like it. This was not strategy learned from books. This was instinct forged in blood and fire. Strike Group 2, target their supply ship. Strike Group 3, draw fire from the eastern flank. Strike Group 4, I need you at coordinates 773 in 90 seconds. Lieutenant Voss worked beside him, relaying orders and tracking the chaos of battle. "Commander, we have destroyed 4 enemy vessels, but we have lost 2 of our own. We cannot sustain this." "We do not need to sustain it," Daniel replied. "We need to break them." He pointed at the tactical display, where the Cathar flagship sat at the center of the formation. "That ship is the key. Vorth commands from there. If we destroy it, their fleet will lose coordination. The captains will panic. They will retreat. But, Commander, the flagship is the most heavily defended ship in the fleet. We cannot get close enough to damage it." Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "One ship can." Sayla watched from the surface as the battle raged above her world. The tactical display showed the dance of ships, the small Valorian vessels darting between the Cathar giants, explosions blooming in the darkness of space. She had never seen war before. It was terrible and beautiful at the same time. Then she saw the Quiet Dawn break formation. Small destroyer turned away from the other ships and drove straight toward the center of the enemy. Fleet, alone, unprotected. What is he doing? Someone in the council chamber whispered. Saela knew. She knew with a certainty that froze her blood. She watched the quiet dawn tear through the Ketha formation, dodging fire, taking hits that should have destroyed it but somehow did not stop it. The ship burned as it flew, trailing flames like a comet. On the bridge of the quiet dawn, alarms screamed. Fires burned in 3 compartments. The hull was breached in half a dozen places. But Daniel stood at the center of the chaos, his hands steady on the controls, his eyes fixed on the flagship ahead. "All crew, abandon ship," he said over the intercom. "Get to the escape pods, now." Lieutenant Voss grabbed his arm. "Commander, you must come too." "You cannot. I must stay to pilot the ship." Daniel turned to face her, and his eyes were calm, at peace. "Get the crew out, Lieutenant. Tell them they fought well. Aye. Tell them Valoria will remember." She wanted to argue. She wanted to drag him to safety. But she saw the truth in his eyes. This was not a man looking for death. This was a man who had found something worth dying for. She gathered the crew and fled to the escape pods. The last thing she saw was Daniel Cooper standing alone on the bridge, guiding his burning ship toward the heart of the enemy fleet. The quiet dawn struck the Cathar flagship at full speed. Daniel had aimed for the reactor core. The explosion that followed was visible from the surface of Valoria, a flash of light so bright it turned night into day. A new star born and dying in the same instant. Sayla watched through tears as the light consumed both ships. She whispered his name over and over, as if saying it could bring him back. The Cathar fleet shattered. Without their flagship, without their commander, the remaining ships fell into chaos. Some tried to continue the attack. They were picked apart by the surviving Valorian vessels. Others fled, scattering into the darkness of space within hours. It was over. The invasion had been broken. But as the people of Valoria celebrated their impossible victory, Sayla stood alone in the council chamber, staring at the fading glow where her husband had burned. He had promised to fight for them. He had promised to make the Cathar pay. He had never promised to come home. The week after the battle passed like a dream for Sayla. She moved through her days without really seeing them. People spoke to her, and she responded with words that felt like they came from someone else. She ate when food was placed before her. She slept when exhaustion pulled her under. But she was not truly there. Part of her was still in the sky, falling toward a burning ship, reaching for a hand she could never hold again. The Cathar Dominion had withdrawn entirely. Their invasion fleet was scattered, their commander dead, their pride shattered. Word spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. The Valorians had been defended by a single human, who gave his life for a world that was not his own. Humans, it seemed, were not so soft after all. On Earth, the news of Daniel Cooper's sacrifice was met with quiet pride. He was declared a hero, though he had no family left to receive the honors. His name was added to the memorial wall in Geneva, alongside other humans who had died serving worlds beyond their own. On Valoria, the council struggled with how to honor a man they had once dismissed as a gardener. Commander Drasis came to see Sayla on the 5th day after the battle. He stood in her doorway, his proud bearing humbled, his eyes heavy with something she recognized as grief. "I came to apologize," he said. "I laughed at your husband. I called him a soft creature who knew nothing of war. I was a fool." Sayla looked at him and felt nothing but exhaustion. "Yes, you were." Drasis nodded, accepting the words without protest. "He saved us all. Every life on this planet, every child who will grow up here, every generation yet to come. They exist because of him. I have served in the military my entire life, and I have never seen anyone fight like that. He was not just brave. He was something beyond brave. He was kind," Sayla said. "That is what you missed. He was the kindest man I have ever known, and that is why he could be so fierce. He was not fighting for glory or honor. He was fighting because he loved us. All of us. Drasis was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "The council wants to hold a memorial service. They have asked me to speak, but I think—" He hesitated. "I think you should speak instead. You knew him. I only saw him at the end." Sayla agreed. Though she did not know what she would say, the memorial was held in the great plaza at the center of the capital, beneath the same twin moons where she and Daniel had been married. Thousands came, not just nobles and counselors, but ordinary people. The merchants who had shared tea with Daniel in the markets. The children who had run to him for sweets. The servants he had always treated with respect. They stood in silence as the council leader spoke. Then Commander Drasis. Then representatives from Earth who had traveled across the stars to honor their fallen son. Finally, it was Sayla's turn. She walked to the platform and looked out at the sea of faces. For a moment, she could not speak. The words she had prepared seemed hollow, inadequate. Then she thought of Daniel in his garden, kneeling among his flowers, speaking softly to plants that could not hear him. "My husband was not a warrior who pretended to be gentle," she said. "He was a gentleman who remembered how to be a warrior. There is a difference." She paused, gathering herself. "He could have lived his whole life planting flowers and writing poetry. He wanted to. I watched him try. But when the darkness came for us, he could not look away. He could not hide in the garden while others suffered. That is what humans are, I think. They are not the strongest species. They are not the fastest or smartest. But they love more fiercely than anyone I have ever seen. And when they love something, they will burn themselves to ash to protect it." She felt tears on her face but did not wipe them away. "Daniel burned for us. He burned so that our children could see another sunrise. He burned so that this world of art and beauty could survive. He burned because he believed we were worth saving." She looked up at the stars, where her husband had become light. "I will spend the rest of my life trying to prove him right." After the ceremony, when the crowds had gone and the plaza was quiet, Sayla returned home alone. The house felt empty without him. His chair at the table, his books on the shelf, his tools in the garden, waiting for hands that would never hold them again. She walked outside and stood among his flowers, the ones he had tended so carefully every morning. Most of them were still blooming, defiant against the approaching cold of autumn. That was when she found it. Beneath the blue flowers from the Valorian highlands, there was a small box wrapped in cloth. She did not remember seeing it before. She knelt and opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a journal, filled with sketches and pressed flowers and words in Daniel's careful handwriting. There were drawings of her face from 100 different angles. There were flowers from every season of their marriage, dried and preserved between the pages. There were notes about their life together, small moments he had wanted to remember. And at the very end, on the last page, there was a letter. "My beloved Sayla," it read. "If you are reading this, then I did not come home. I am sorry. I wanted so badly to come home that I spent years trying to forget what I was. I ran across the stars searching for peace. And I found it in the strangest place, in a world of crystal towers and purple moons. In the arms of a woman who loved a gardener without knowing he had once been something else. You asked me once what I was before. I was afraid to tell you. I was afraid you would see me differently, that you would look at my hands and see blood instead of soil. But you never looked at me like that. You saw me, just me, the man I wanted to be. I hope you understand why I had to go. I was not choosing death. I was choosing you and your world and everything beautiful that you represent. I was choosing a future where you can sit in this garden and watch the flowers bloom without fear. I am not brave. Sayla, I was terrified. But I remembered what you taught me, that gentleness is not weakness. It is strength that chooses to be soft. And when something you love is threatened, sometimes the gentlest thing you can do is stand between it and the darkness. Plant something beautiful in my garden. Watch it grow. Think of me when the flowers bloom. I love you. I will always love you. And wherever I am now, I'm still loving you. Yours forever, Daniel. Selah read the letter 3 times, tears falling onto the paper. Then she folded it carefully and pressed it to her heart. The next morning, she went to the garden and planted a new flower, a species from Earth that Daniel had kept in a special pot, waiting for the right moment. It was called a sunflower, and when it bloomed, it would open toward the light like a small golden sun. She knelt in the soil where her husband had knelt so many times before, and she planted something that would grow. Across the galaxy, humans would always be underestimated. They were small and soft, quick to laugh and quick to love. They planted gardens and wrote poetry and wept at beautiful things. But when darkness came, they burned brighter than any star. They burned for the things they loved. And in the end, that fire could light the whole universe.